Today, we are joined by Jenny Fernandez, VP of Marketing at Loacker, a food company known throughout the globe for its wafers and chocolate specialties. While Jenny is actively growing the brand in the US, she's leveraging years of experience from Kraft Foods and Mondelez International, where she led marketing for well-known snack brands like Oreo, Trident Gum, and Milka. Afterward, Jenny was VP of Marketing at Merlin Entertainments, which owns over 130 worldwide attractions and theme parks. From engineer to executive marketer, Jenny shares her learnings with peers and future leaders. Not only does she teach at Columbia and New York University, she also coaches female executives on how to position themselves ahead of disruption once they break through the proverbial glass ceiling. Hosted by Youngmi Park, an expert in strategic marketing and executive leadership, let's listen as Jenny Fernandez takes her seat at the table.
So, Jenny, welcome. Welcome to our AMA Take Your Seat at the Table interview series. How are you doing today?
Hi, Yamin. I'm doing really well. Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
We're so delighted. So, to get us warmed up, can you give us a high-level snapshot of who you are and what's going on in your world today?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So again, my name is Jenny Fernandez. I'm the VP of Marketing at Loacker USA. And basically, I'm multifaceted in the way that I have many hats at this time. I'm also a startup advisor. Basically, I advise startups both at Columbia and NYU through my teaching. And I also proactively advise some incubators here in New York City. And in addition, my final love is really coaching. Most recently, I've been working the past couple of years as an executive coach, advising female leaders, both in corporate and entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. That's fabulous. But you didn't start off there. You started off with a very, very different background in math and engineering. So tell us, how did you end up in marketing?
Yeah, no, that's right. So basically, I did undergrad in mathematics. I was going to be a math PhD, believe it or not. My path was going to be a math professor. But I decided that I was going to combine math and business because I fell in love for the application side of things. I really saw how sciences or analytics could be applied into business and create real solutions immediately for society. And one of the reasons that I basically kind of pivoted while as an undergrad, and I decided to join the business force working for Accenture at the time, doing consulting and marrying those two.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So those are quite a few twists and turns. Can you tell us about some of the highlights of a couple of those experiences?
Yes, of course.
Especially when you made the transitions, because transitions are always very, very interesting, right?
Yeah, no, of course. So as I mentioned, my first pivot was into consulting. And what I loved about consulting and Accenture as a company was the fact that it allowed me to join many different corporate organizations as a project, team member. And understand a lot of corporate cultures. So it was really a great crash course in understanding people, influencing, and what drives them. Because you can imagine, as a junior person, very humbly going into different projects, working with clients that had 15, 20 years of experience, you have to be very humble in the approach when you're interviewing them, when you're getting information, so that they see you not as a threat, but as an ally, somebody who's there to help bring best practices, frameworks, and help as an outsider bring solutions that maybe they haven't been able to see or push through the organization. So that was kind of my first pivot. And the second one was deciding to go back to business school to Kellogg to pivot into marketing. And the reason why I did that, again, was because of my desire to work with people and because of my desire for accountability. I really wanted to have ownership of the project from end to end and really be able, again, to make the application of the project. Because one of the key problems that consultants face is that many times, we give recommendations, but it sits very nicely in a binder in
Yeah.
somebody's office, and it
Yeah.
is not implemented. So I really wanted to be able to be accountable and have ownership of the project, of whatever initiative I was recommending, and see it all the way through. And I think that that thread has really carried out in my storyline throughout my career, really having that kind of ownership.
Yeah, yeah, fabulous. So, going back to your consulting experience, let's drill down a little bit more into that because you were very young, and so how did you ever have an experience where you didn't start off with the kind of credibility you needed as the consultant, and how did you handle that experience?
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh, of course, many, many times initially in my projects, because again, I was new and I was just building experiences in a particular industry. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, because of my work, I was brought into the retail and manufacturing sector that they had. And then I continued to build more experiences there.
Mm-hmm.
But as I initially joined, basically what I had to do was, well, first of all, really learn a lot, both by reading white papers, industry papers, looking and finding out best practices within the organization to see what had worked elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I could bring that in. And frankly, relying on my teammates and other people on the project to ensure that I was, again, as being a sponge and learning from others, really being open, not thinking that I had all the answers as I was literally new, but just really being able to learn from others and then try to see if I could add a little value, like what was going to be my Jenny stamp, so that I can continue to build my experiences and build my value add.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, after business school, when
Yes.
you took your first job in marketing, were there any surprises transitioning from consulting to marketing?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise as I joined Kraft Foods, even as an intern, it was how analytical marketing is. I
Mm-hmm.
think people many times think, those of us who are in marketing and even those who are not, think that marketing is just common sense. And
Mm-hmm.
a great deal it is. You have to build that gut kind of feeling, that experience that helps you make decisions and make recommendations. But it is very much relying on data. Everything from understanding where how a product or a service is selling, what is the return on investment on an advertising campaign, what is the click-through rate for digital marketing these days. So all of those things matter in order to help you make better decisions and ensure that you are really maximizing the dollars that you're investing and that you're reaching more people. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your message and your story is being heard by the people, by your target, the consumers who are in need of your product or service.
Sure, sure. You must have loved that aspect of marketing coming from your background.
I have to tell marketers, don't be afraid of the numbers. You don't
That's
have to be a
right.
finance manager, but don't be afraid of the numbers.
That's right. That's right. They are your friend, right?
They're your friend.
Yeah, yeah. So you spent a while at Kraft and Mondelez. So tell us a little bit about your progressions through the organization.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I had a lot of great experiences at Kraft and Mondelez. Basically, I had the track where you are just a manager, marketing manager, and you are managing a brand, everything from small brands like, gosh, Cream of Wheat back in my day, all the way to bigger brands like Trident. That is number one in the gum category. So again, that sense of ownership, accountability, on owning the numbers, understanding the business, who your consumer is, that was really a great hat or experience that I had. In addition, I had the pleasure to work in the breakthrough innovation team at Kraft. It was a time where we had just merged with Cadbury, and great synergies in terms of knowledge transfer. So I worked for the breakthrough team, and we worked in amazing 3-year further out innovation, really pushing the envelope, understanding what consumers wanted and what they didn't know they wanted. Because at the end of the day, you want to delight them with new news. And that was really a great experience because it allowed me to challenge myself and by, again, looking at data, understand what the consumer was telling me, what was the trend telling me, and how I can connect the dots for them. One specific innovation that I worked on was Triscuit brown rice. crackers, which delivered an amazing crunch for consumers. It allowed us to pivot the brand position from being just kind of a satiating snack that people had as a mini meal to actually a more crunchy, snackable product, hand to mouth. So that was kind of a great pivot. And another experience that I have to cite is really my time in Asia. I worked and lived in China for almost 3 years. I was the director for Oreo in Asia Pacific, and it was an amazing experience again because I was influencing 13 countries, had responsibility for P&Ls for all of those markets, being able to craft together the strategy, the innovation sufficiency and pipeline and margin projects for 3 years out in order to ensure that we had the right trajectory for transformational growth.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I want to get into that Asia experience, but before we do, about that innovation team that you worked on, it's not easy to merge teams or merge brands or anything like that. So you said it was a great experience. What helped make it a great experience aside from how interesting the work was? The people factors.
The people factor. Yeah, no, it was actually, I was working for Greg Shushak at the time. He was actually from the Cadbury side and he had come in. So he was really, it was really great because he was helping open up new ideas and new thinking for the organization. And it all goes back to frameworks. I think frameworks help us really see very clearly areas that we can explore and what are potential big sites. And one big shift was also working with different partners, really elevating who you're working with so that you are bringing in new information and new best practices. And I think, again, that was what was really pivotal because you are really having a learning mindset, as a new lens, thinking and doing differently. And this is something that I feel it was a change for Kraft because we were known for innovation, but usually it was closer in. And I think what Cadbury opened up was the opportunity to really be breakthrough in terms of planning further out where we needed to go.
Yeah. So you were starting from different places, but you found points of commonality that made sense for both. That's fantastic. All right. So Jenny, not everybody leaves their cushy job in America and decides to go overseas to emerging markets. And some are mature, but some are emerging. So tell us more about what inspired that and how you navigated there.
Yes, no, thank you. Actually, that's really, I think, a great story for me and something that has been very pivotal for my own transformation. That job and that opportunity opened up as a result of a network experience within my own company. My prior manager, her name is Hyen Wan. She was one of my first managers as a brand manager. And it was great because we had an amazing relationship. Later on, she went on to become the CMO of China Kraft. And I kept that relationship going. Like it was no particular, reason. I had no interest to go to Asia at the time. I thought that I was going to, at some point in my career, potentially go to Europe. Something, like you said, a little more developed, more common, more familiar. But I always made sure that I was adding value to her relationship. So I was always letting her know, what was happening in the US, keeping her abreast, almost like being top of mind or kind of delivering awareness of what I was doing as well. And it was something that, really, again, it was very natural to me. But I think looking back, it's something that myself and others can learn from. Because if you look to create a networking relationship where you are adding value to the other person, you're not asking for favors, then you really develop something where the person will always be looking out for you because you have along the way delivered some kind of value. I don't know if you have read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini, but I love his work. He's a very famous psychologist, and one of the influence weapons, as he calls it, is this whole idea of reciprocity. The idea is that, we as a human community, having the DNA, the idea that we help each other. So if you add value to somebody else, at some point, they will want to return that value back. And it may turn out to be when you need it the most, when you're making a transition, when you want an opportunity, they become a sponsor for you. So I think that's something to always have in mind.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. There must have been quite a lot of culture shock transitioning. Not only just pure culture, but also the way the job is handled, the way the business is managed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, and I think the culture shock was because my role was inclusive of 13 different countries. So everywhere from China, which is an amazing country that is the tale of two cities. China has, Shanghai and Beijing, 23, 25 million people cities. So they're huge, very developed. Yet they have smaller B and C cities that, even though they're big in size, just a tiny 8 million, they are still in more the emerging side. And at the same time, I was working with Southeast Asia, with developed markets like Japan, Korea, and Australia. So I was working with Oreo as a brand that had a very different life stage for different consumers in different markets. So I really needed to, again, understand and listen to the different challenges that every market, every team had, be able to kind of influence and work hand in hand with them to see where we could kind of work together to deliver value for the brand and the consumer. So it was a very interesting experience because, like, for example, India, it was a 4-year-old brand and we were trying to grow it. So it was very different than in China, where it was established 20 years old and, kind of a $600 million brand. So it was kind of, again, an opportunity for me to be flexible in my own marketing and to know that a cookie cutter approach was not going to work for all of Asia. I needed really to work hand in hand with the local markets to deliver something that worked in each market.
Sure, sure. So did you have to change your recipes for any of the markets there, or did you keep one recipe?
Yeah, no, so that's a great question. Oreo as a global brand, we needed to have basically one key recipe. You want Oreo to be Oreo everywhere, especially because consumers fly, or pre-COVID, we used to fly more often, fly everywhere.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that the DNA and the essence of the brand is the same globally. There are slight changes that you can make, but very minor. What we call the local, global, and local framework provided us with, again, a framework and a structure to know what we could change. So usually recipe, the consumer target, the brand communication doesn't change, but you can localize flavors, packaging, sizes, communication, execution, influencers, music, language, all of those things that are locally driven.
Yeah. That's a really tough decision, though, and that's different companies handle it differently. So did that cause you any problem in any of the markets where maybe some markets thought Oreo was too sweet, or some of the ingredients didn't really fit with the local palate? Did you encounter any problems like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, in India, one of the challenges that we faced was that the consumer thought consumers who knew Oreo from a global perspective and were familiar with the brand, they knew and loved the product as it was. Yeah. But to bring in new consumers, it's kind of interesting, but most folks in India know chocolate by Cadbury Dairy Milk. So it is a milk. So Cadbury Dairy Milk is a milk chocolate, lighter in color, sweeter in nature. Yeah. So when they tasted Oreo, they thought it was kind of more burnt and too sweet. Yeah. So it was a big aha for us, and actually a big aha for even the local marketers who knew this, but were challenged to try to change the brand too much. They wanted to deliver kind of the true essence of Oreo.
Right, right. So how did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so what we did as a global team was, make decisions and provide a framework that local markets could use in order to know how much the flexibility they had into switching different elements of the brand. So we, again, provided some flexibility, but still maintaining what we call the essence of our product.
So you were kind of educating the consumer to start accepting the new taste and...
No, but also empowering the local market to flex a little bit on different elements. I mean, I cannot go into the specific details of it for IP reasons, but definitely they had the ability to flex certain things so that they will be more empowered to communicate to the consumer our product.
Sure. How about the messaging? How did you, vary that by market, or did you have a consistent framework? How did you manage that?
No, it's a great question. We had a consistent framework for the messaging when it comes to, again, the brand essence of the product, what the insight was. We were shifting from, to be a little bit less about kind of that moment in time where you have that moment with your kids, to be more about wonder at the time. And again, the brand has evolved since then. But basically, the essence of the brand remained the same from a communication point of view. What was flexible was really, again, the execution of it, language, music, how you talk to the consumers. Asia was a little bit more advanced even when it comes to digital marketing at the time, in China with WeChat, etc. So a lot of great things that they could actually do and innovate on, and other best practices that they could borrow. It's funny, one of the things that we were looking at when we were executing the Transformers 4 global campaign, we had a global advertising. So Michael Bay, the director, did this advertising for all the markets. There was like literally almost no language spoken. It was just like, thank you, kid, when he got when the robot got the cookie. But we had the ability to, localize all of the execution, had local flavors that supported that IMC campaign. One of the things that I borrowed from other markets was recipes. We did recipe creation from Latin America, and we borrowed that to China so that we can create solutions for moms and families.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. And so from that experience, when you came back to the US, were there things that you brought from that experience to kind of, spur innovation, or any other kind of thing that you could cross-fertilize from that market that benefited US activities?
Yes, no, totally. I think one of the biggest learnings for me in that global role and in Asia, given that I had 13 markets I was working with, was this whole idea of cross-pollination and best practices. That, if it works elsewhere, borrow with pride. Don't be afraid that everything you do has to be newly created for you. Look externally at other markets within your company, look externally at other competitors and see what works. Because then if you have the basics, once you have this whole strategy of back to basics, once you have the basics done, that the 4 Ps are working, that your communication is working, then you can really elevate and innovate next. Sometimes I think marketers lose sight of the basics because it's not as sexy, but you really have to have the foundations done right in order to be able to have that taken care of, and then start innovating when it comes to digital marketing, to communication, to do test and learns. Another idea, Yanmin, was this, as I just mentioned, this whole idea of experimenting and testing and learning.
Yeah.
Because then you can try to see what works and push the envelope a little more. Like tech companies like Google always have like 10% of their time and budget towards new innovation. Yeah. And I think that's something great because it allows you to break out from historical things that you have done before, the tried and true, which are always good. But I think digital marketing and transformation is happening so fast that you have to try new things so that you're not left behind.
Sure. No, definitely. And I love what you said, borrow with pride, and test and learn is certainly becoming essential because things are changing so quickly. So, Jenny, what was harder, going over to Asia or coming back?
It was actually harder coming back from Asia.
Yeah. I think most people say that. Yeah.
I think it is something that happens to many expats where, going to a different market is just new and innovative and really exciting. And especially in Asia, I mean, they have grown double digit, for the past 20 years with some dips here and there. And they have really catapulted things and marketing. Especially in the digital transformation area. I mean, you go to China and you don't think anybody uses cash for any transaction. It's all paperless. Yeah. So they were ahead of their time. So coming back, it was quite interesting because it was around 2015. So basically, I was away at the time where digital marketing was exploding in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So and frankly, direct to consumer. And this is something that it was quite interesting because coming back, especially for people who are doing transitions, I came back thinking, like you mentioned, Yamin, not many marketers go abroad, not many marketers go to Asia. So I thought my global experience was going to be, opening up tons of doors within the company, my choice of projects. Yet it was very different because the entire marketing category and companies were focused more on their own survival.
Mm-hmm.
It was a time where direct to consumer exploded, and before you needed $100 million to open a new bakery. Now you need your kitchen, and you can start cooking up and
Yeah.
selling direct to consumer.
New world.
So really, lower the barriers of entry, and it created just kind of a frenzy of competitors, of new innovation, which is great for the consumer, but it just disrupted what we as marketers knew that what marketing was and what we thought the future of work was going to be.
Right.
So coming back again, it was kind of eye-opening because I thought, wow, companies are flattening structures. The general management track that I was kind of raised to be, that North Star, it's kind of gone because companies, stopped recruiting MBA candidates. It was just kind of this entire disruption that had been caused by the digital transformation that was happening globally, especially here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, I think, eye-opening, and that was the start of my own transformation.
Yeah. So tell us more about that. That's so interesting how you've had every twist in your career has been like a major transformation, but this next one may have been the biggest, right?
Yeah, no, totally it was. I think I expected to be in my craft modelist company until I retired.
Yeah.
But the world changed. And frankly, even expectations of what was valued by companies, by recruiters was changing.
Yeah.
Having founder or startup or kind of that new branding in your resume, in your profile was actually valued, highly valued now, even if the company had failed, but because you had tried.
Sure.
So it just really opened up the idea that you have to, especially after going into business school, you have to create your own milestones.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have kind of that, again, that learning growth mindset, and always challenge yourself, always keep evolving. And what that meant for me, and this is kind of my connection to coaching, I was introduced to the idea of coaching, and that really elevated my own self-awareness in terms of what I love doing, what I wanted in my professional life. It led to my desire to try something different. So I went to services marketing when I joined Merlin. Because I wanted to see how the service economy was impacting consumers. Consumers were really valuing being able to take that selfie and show in social media when they were the star. They didn't need a product to be the star.
Right. Right.
So that was an experience that I wanted to have. I wanted to add to kind of my profile. And then I decided to go back to food because that's always been my passion. Health and wellness is something that I'm very passionate about. And that balance between indulgence and healthiness. There's always room for indulgence. There's always room for reward.
Sure.
And it's something that, again, but the reason why I joined Loacker is that it is an amazing, privately held company. I think it's always been ahead of its time. Since 1925, it's actually been supporting sustainability. The bakeries and the headquarters is actually in the Italian Alps, believe it or not. The founders wanted to have pure air, clean water. So a lot of those things kind of led me to where I am today. And in addition, to go back to the coaching aspect, it also opened up for me a couple of things. I decided to pursue my desire to teach because I always wanted to be a professor. So I thought, why do I have to wait until I retire? Who's holding me back? I can create this for myself now. So I, created that for myself, that milestone, and then I went for it. I decided to become an advisor to startups because, as I mentioned, while, maybe I don't have, I'm not in the time of my life where I can put founder yet in my experiences, I can advise others who have all of those challenges ahead but who can benefit from my many years of marketing experience and business experience to elevate. Because one of the key challenges where startups fail is that they get to a point where they need to scale up and get new distribution, become big enough, but they don't have the ability or the toolkit to get there. And this is something that I think is sometimes challenging for startups to realize, and for us as individuals. Marshall Goldsmith, who's the guru of coaching globally, has an amazing book called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." So how are we adding to our toolkits in order to get to the next level? Again, goes back to that growth mindset.
Yeah. So, Jenny, Miss Transformation, what do you see in your future? Yeah. So, what are you kind of like building here?
Yeah, no, thank you. So it's funny, one of the additional keywords that I want to add to my profile is actually author. So I'm working with a coach myself. So I actually, walk the talk. And I'm working with a coach because I want to publish a book. I want to publish work that talks about personal transformation. And I actually have created a little ebook that I can share with the participants here today so that they can start having some reflective questions and assessments and exercises so that they can build their own brands.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. So after all of these twists and turns, and you've been very, very thoughtful along the way as well. Tell us a little bit more. I mean, you've already mentioned a lot about this, but is there anything else about the world of marketing that shifted that marketers today really need to pay attention to? Because, we get into our ruts where we do a lot of the same things again and again. What are some of the differences that you haven't mentioned? Maybe more from a personal perspective. Bring in your coaching hat into this conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a great question. So I think especially now, because of what we're going through with COVID-19 and the pandemic, I think what we need to do as marketers is always think about the consumer and their needs. This is a time where, families or individuals are at home, they're balancing many different things. It's what solutions can we bring to them? It's not only about the product or the service that we're delivering, but it's about both, excuse me, solutions and content. What can we provide to them that's going to help them at this moment in time to have either a break time moment, if this is what our brand's supposed to deliver, have a moment with family that allows them to kind of enjoy and step back. What is the role that we play in their lives, especially today, so that we're adding the most value that we can add, both from a brand perspective, from in-store accessibility, from contactless, from information. I think some of those things are questions that we need to have, especially, I would say, Yanmin, in terms of content creation, leveraging the digital world to provide information, access, memories, pictures, things that are going to help them have kind of a better brand experience.
Yeah. No, that's very true and very insightful. And in that context, if you were launching your career today, would you do the same thing, do things differently? What do you think?
If I were launching my career today, I think I would definitely, keep in mind what is relevant today, which is about testing and learning. Ensuring that you are, mapping out your career 3 years out continuously, that you have a plan, you have milestones that you have put in place yourself so that you're always learning. And then so that you can then assess, who do I want to be 3 years from now? And what am I doing today to get there? And then this is everything from having the right, of course, credentials, support, training, but also having the right network. Many of us, I think, fall into kind of a mistake where everybody that is in our network looks like us. They're all marketers, they're all in CPG, they're all in food, they're all in the US. So that doesn't, think of yourself as a brand. That doesn't give you reach. We need to start thinking, who do I want to be 3 years from now? And do I have that network in place today so that I can start, again, building a relationship and adding value to them.
True.
One of the big mistakes, I think, in networking, and that we feel a little dirty after a networking event, is because we're always networking only when we need something, when we need a job, an introduction. And we need to start networking with the long term in mind. How do I bring value to that person so that you're building a different kind of relationship?
That's so wise. Jenny, were you always a planner like that? I mean, I think there were a couple of surprises in your career too. So how did they fit in? And so two
No,
questions in one.
no, that's very interesting. I think I've always been a planner, but I think I've always planned with the milestones that society or family has placed in front of me. Like I always knew I wanted to go to grad school. I always knew, I wanted to be a professor. But I think what was really eye-opening about coaching is that it allowed me to become the source. It allowed me to be the person in control. So I am not waiting for somebody to put kind of a milestone in front of me. I am going to create that for myself. And this is something that I think is very empowering because it allows you to shift mentality from just being somebody in the sidelines to somebody who's actually in the field playing. And you're the one saying, well, what do I want to do next? If I want to be an author, where's my blog? Do I have publishers in my network? How do I build that ecosystem that is going to allow me to get that next goal?
Sure. Fantastic. Fantastic. So if there's one word of advice you could give for women who want to attain leadership roles in marketing, what would that be?
So definitely for women, I would say be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is have courage. Many of us, I think it's more prevalent in women that we feel sometimes the imposter syndrome. We don't take chances or risks as much as men do. It's kind of in our nature. So I think what we need to do is just be mindful of that and know that we have proven that we can learn by doing.
Right.
We learn by doing every day on the job. So if you feel you have 50% of the credentials, of the experience, can you learn the rest? And can you take a chance so that you can then go for that opportunity, go for that side kind of stretch role, go for that promotion? Sure. Many times we feel that we have to be at 110% before we go for that role.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Jenny, there are so many more questions I have for you, but I'm going to open it up to the audience. So first, we'll start off with a few questions that audience members sent in early on. And I think that a couple of these we can combine in the interest of time, because I think that aspects of what you've been talking about speak to them in a similar perspective. So first, two questions. How do you get the attention of recruiters without enough work experience? And what advice do you have on re-entering the workforce after a long break at home with kids? So because you've done so many transitions, I think both of them have something in common. So can you speak to those?
Yes, no, thank you. Those are great questions. So I think it goes back to your brand. Do you know who you are and what is your story? I think all of us need to take control of our storytelling so that we then are the ones doing an amazing job selling it and convincing others of it. So what I mean by that is, you have to look back and think, what am I good at? What's my superpower? So that you can then identify, so how does this story go through my work experience? How do I connect the dots for the recruiter, for the hiring manager? So that I can explain, I have the credentials, I have past experiences that, that match the job needs that I'm going for, or for the promotion that I'm asking. You have to, again, put together a narrative that helps you sell who you are.
And what if the person on the other side, has a different narrative about who you are and what you do? And, oftentimes that's the case, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great follow-up. So one of the things that I recommend my coachees and recommend everybody to do continuously is do your own brand assessment on yourself. I would say ask 3 people that you know and that you trust that can give you honest feedback, and ask them, What are the 3 words that come up for you that best describe me? So that you can understand perception-wise, what do others think about you? And how does that compare to your own perception of yourself and the marketing, the self-branding story you want to portray? Because then if there is a mismatch, then you have to, this gives you kind of the area that you need to work on.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think is super valuable because, for example, very quickly, I mean, if you come across as somebody who's analytical, great at project management, and great with people, but you're trying to be somebody who's strategic, client focused, and creative, you have things to work on and you need to put actions in place in order to work on that transition.
Great. So I have a couple more questions that I want to ask from the questions that audience members sent in, but I also want to encourage people in the audience to type in your questions into the chat. So you've heard some of Jenny's thoughts. I'm sure that you want to hear more of them. So what are some other things that you'd like her to speak about? But while we're waiting for questions to come in, here's another couple that were sent in. So the first is, how do you become a leader or manager when you have no direct reports? So it's getting into what is leadership and how do you cultivate those skills? And similarly, what are the skills you need to develop and thrive in more senior positions? So
great. No, thank you. Really great questions. So I would say to answer the first one, at the end of the day, it's all about influencing. Regardless of whether or not the people report to you, nowadays it's almost irrelevant because we have shifted as a organization, as business leaders, from the command and control approach where you just tell somebody what to do to more influencing and coaching where you are helping them solve their own problems, where you're more of a guide versus somebody who's telling them and ordering. So you have to, again, be a great listener. So you can do that with cross-functional teams, with people who your clients you're working with agency partners. Listen and understand what drives them. What do they need from you? How can you influence them in order to prioritize your projects, in order to deliver your results?
Sure.
So those are some great ways to do that.
Excellent. And another person asked, how did you become a startup advisor?
Yeah, thank you. So actually, as I looked at my brand, that's again one of the areas that I wanted to add to my brand. So what I decided to do was I looked into incubators and schools that had those kind of associations. And I learned that Columbia had the social ventures at Columbia Business School, and NYU had the Berkeley Lab. So I literally applied. And you have to interview and apply and go through a process so that you can prove yourself worthy of being that advisor and leader and somebody who can guide others. And again, somebody who's going to have the personality to influence others because it's about knowledge sharing, it's about mentoring.
Sure.
So that was kind of my process.
Great. And now live questions from the audience. So Gabriella would like to know, what skills did you have to develop as you climbed into more senior positions? How did the skill sets change?
Yes, no, thank you. And I think, so I would say the first one that I would say is agility. It's both adaptability, but you have to be adaptable to things that happen within the organization, especially disruption. The way digital disruption is affecting the organizations that are flatter, that have to be more nimble, even though they have a lot of process in place. You have to also be externally focused. So you have to try to see what disruption is coming in the future and how can I help the organization be ready and be flexible enough to adapt and to actually thrive when those changes happen.
And along the way, I think that you also had a lot of people that helped you as well. And you've mentioned how they were very important for your transitions. So, what kinds of people did you look for? I mean, because nobody creates their career by themselves, right?
No.
It takes a network, like you already mentioned. So mention a couple of the people that helped you along.
Yeah, no. So, and also, I want to position it as what are the relationships that you need to
Mm,
build.
mm,
So I would say it's great to have a mentor, somebody
mhm.
who has shown you the path, somebody
Right.
who has been successful. So
Uh-huh.
High-End One was kind of my mentor, and she did the China path and brought me along the way. So she served both as what I call a mentor and a sponsor.
Mhm.
A sponsor is somebody who's going to be a powerful ally who's actually in the room behind closed doors when they're making decisions on opportunities. So
Mhm.
this person can speak on your behalf and also create opportunities for you. So this
Mhm.
is something that is actually really pivotal to also have within an organization.
Mhm.
And something that another role that I have been working on recently, more externally,
Mhm.
is this whole idea of a peer ally or a peer ally group,
Mhm. Very
where
good.
you can join networks,
Mhm.
Facebook groups, or networking, in your alma mater. For me at Kellogg, where you are surrounded by one or several people who can help elevate the work you do, and you
Mhm.
can do the same for them. So
Yeah.
many times what I do when I curate work in LinkedIn is elevate the work of people who I think are doing amazing work, but also with this whole idea that I am in that network and
Mm.
I want them to also, kind of help elevate my work as well. And this is something that happened, I think, for the women in the Obama administration,
Mhm.
where many times in a room they would elevate each other to highlight. Did you hear the great story Jenny said just now? This
Mhm.
is great
Mhm.
because it just also helps you break through when there's a group full of men, when you have
Yeah.
somebody else that helps deliver your message.
That's such a fantastic point. And I have to say that I see a lot more of that happening since the Me Too movement. And I think it's great. It's just like such a different kind of, instead of waiting for the social framework to accept us, we're kind
Yes.
of creating that a new framework. So I love that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I was
no,
I
no, go
was
ahead.
gonna
Go
say
ahead. Uh-huh.
completely, and just to make sure,
Mhm.
this can be women or male allies. To be honest,
Yeah.
many
Right.
times, especially when there's a room that is more senior, it's
Yeah.
usually more men. So
Mhm.
ask them to be your ally, and they can help you along the way. I think this is something that is gender neutral that you can create everywhere.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Going back to the mentors and sponsors, however, it's not always the easiest thing for people to see how you can get a mentor or a sponsor. So, what's your word of advice on that?
No, that's so true. I think you have to. Of course, it's about building relationships. These are not strangers. These
Mhm.
are people who you have built a relationship that either you have worked for or who happen to have visibility to your work, who
Mhm.
see how great you are and what you have done and what you have delivered, and who
Mhm.
believe in you. And then you can have an honest discussion and just simply ask and see. Given that we know each other, this is the work that I have done. I feel like I'm in a great place, and I have kind of checked all the boxes. I would love to have you as my sponsor when those meetings are happening for stretch opportunities, because this is where I want to go next.
Mhm.
If they value what you have done, if they see you as even a potential ally for them, because again, it's this whole kind of symbiotic relationship where you also at some point will help deliver value for them, then they potentially will sign up and say yes. It is, so you have to ask. Not everybody will say yes, but I think it's something that, again, taking control of your own career, you
Mhm.
have to be open enough to ask.
Fantastic, fantastic. And a related question, Giovanni wants to know how do you, because it takes cultivating these relationships, and we can also learn more about how the outside world is perceiving us through these relationships. There are so many benefits. Giovanni is asking, how do you go about asking your current employer for personal feedback?
Oh, no, that's great. That's great. So I mean, frankly, all organizations have what we call an annual review, which is
Mhm.
once a year process. But
Mhm.
I think that's basically too late.
Mm,
That's almost like after the fact. So,
sure.
in order to be, again, the source and the person in control, you
Mhm.
should feel free to ask continuous feedback.
Mhm.
And this is something that I also do now. I work with actually somebody who I work for Kraft Mondelez, TJ Rooney. He's been a great, mentor and leader. And this is one of the reasons why I joined Loacker, because I will get to work with him. So I always have this open relationship where we're very direct with each other because we want to grow. We're a tiny little group and we want to make sure that we're maximizing everything we do and we want to move fast. So this whole idea of fail fast. So ask, create a test and learn for the company, for yourself. Ask for feedback continuously. Feedback is just data. So I feel like it's a simple question, hey, I'm working on this. I'm trying to maybe improve on my influencing skills, or I'm trying to improve on the way I do X, Y, Z. Will you mind giving me feedback every time, I work on this initiative? Or I'm trying to be more assertive in a meeting. Would you mind giving me feedback after every meeting? So that you can have this point of information and you can see, am I improving? Is there something that this learning and this feedback can tell me so that I can continue to evolve and improve continuously?
That's fantastic. So it doesn't have to be so heavy. It can be kind of like a natural back and forth. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And Lisa appreciates your recommendations. You recommended Influence, but you also recommended What Got You Here Won't Get You There. She wants to know, what other books would you recommend?
Oh, yes, definitely. And I have some books and some resources in my little ebook. But basically, let's see, Dory Clark has a great book called Reinventing You, which is, again, about personal branding, about this idea of understanding kind of what is your brand essence and how can you, with that self-awareness, create a story and create kind of your next big opportunity. So that's a book that I highly recommend. I also, recommend a couple of podcasts, and I have in my little ebook. One is by Jordan Harbinger. That is about networking, really little things that you can do both now, working within COVID, virtual coffees, happy hours, literally just going through your cell phone and looking at who you haven't talked to in a while and just sending them a quick text that says, or email that says, hey, we'd love to learn, this, I know we haven't spoken for a while. I would love to check in and learn what's new in your life or work life. No urgency in the reply, because you don't want to create, work for people. But when they're ready, they'll reply back. So you can then create a cycle of emails, texts, just kind of requests, so that you're always then speaking with 2 or 3 people every week.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Pilar is asking if you could repeat the Columbia and NYU programs that you had mentioned a little earlier.
Oh, sure. For NYU, it's the Berkeley Labs. So the NYU Stern Berkeley Labs. And I can put it again in the chat or in the follow-up. And for Columbia Business School, it is the Tamer Social Ventures.
Great, great. And Shamida is asking if you could repeat the name of the podcast that you recommended. Somebody typed it in the...
the Jordan Harbinger Show.
Great, great. And Jenny, I mean, this might be premature to ask, but when can we look forward to your book?
No, thank you. Oh gosh, ideally, I would love to have it by the end of next year. So that's a goal. So either late 2021 or early 2022. But thank you for that. And that reminds me, I do recommend everybody to please reach out to me via LinkedIn. Please connect. I will be relaunching my website next week so that you can also get content from me, articles, resources through LinkedIn and also through my website, jennymfernandez.com.
You anticipated my next question, because I want to ask how people could stay in touch. But before we get there, tell us a little bit. So to build up the anticipation, tell us a little bit about what your book is going to be about.
Yes. So my book right now, what I'm kind of writing so far is about transformational branding. It's this whole idea that we as leaders have to take control of our narrative. We have to be prepared for disruption and what's coming. And as we have seen so far, Yanmin, this rate of disruption is accelerating. So how do we take control and are disruption proof? This is something that I feel is very close to my heart, because I am somebody who really cares about people. I valued all of the kind of the systems and institutions, being a professor that are in place. And I want to make sure that people know that they are relevant. Machines are not going to take over, but we have to leverage our humanity in a better way so that we're not bound by these tasks that we do today, and that we can reinvent ourselves if that doesn't, exist tomorrow. So one question that I ask everybody to think about is, if your role, if your function, if your job didn't exist tomorrow, what would you do? Are you ready for that?
Right, 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 right. We have to have that mindset at every moment. And I know that you have a gift for the audience, but I'm going to turn this back to Esther to wrap up because we only have a couple minutes left.
Yes.
And so I'll let Esther, and thank you in advance for offering that to everybody.
Thank you.